Hello and welcome to ATF TV. I'm Christine Zhou reporting from London. Today we have with us Simon Quijano-Evans, who is the chief economist at GemCorp Capital LLP. Simon joins us from London today and will talk about EM versus DM ratings. Welcome to ATF TV, Simon.
Hi.
Simon, to begin, recently we've seen a disparity in how rating agencies and markets globally are reading sovereign ratings. What are the most glaring differences, and what is your understanding as to the reasons behind this?
So it's a very interesting question, and I think essentially I've been looking at emerging markets for a good 25 years now, and I remember the early 2000s, the early noughties, when Central and Eastern European credits were rated way off their European Union counterparts or Western European counterparts, and there seemed to be a lot of discrepancy there. Markets were always pricing in ratings upgrades and spread as they reflected in their spreads. They are doing it now, as you mentioned as well. And I think what really does stand out now at the moment is or what really is gaping is the fact that Sub-Saharan African ratings are very low. We're talking about up to 9 notches below Eurozone periphery countries. And this is also reflected then in the spreads. Although at single B, there is a lot of discrepancy. You can have good 200, 300, 400 basis points difference. But I think there, from what your question started point of view, I think that very clearly Sub-Saharan Africa is underrated.
So, Simon, should investors read the two different rating messages, i.e. the rating assigned by agencies and the pricing that has been assigned by the market?
I think markets do reflect their views. And let's face it, many countries in Sub-Saharan Africa aren't really analyzed to the greater extent that countries like Turkey, for example, or South Africa or Brazil are analyzed. And you need a lot of resources as a fund manager to do so. So I think in a number of cases, you'd already start to see that, especially the oil exporting countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, that spreads are lower than what ratings are telling us. And then you have other countries, for example, like Angola, where both ratings and spreads, in my view, are too high and where there is plenty of potential for spreads to come down, yields to come down as well, and ratings to improve. But 2020 was a shock year for everybody. Because of the COVID-19 virus and all the negative effects there. And I think that one point here one has to really emphasize is that many analysts, many politicians, many ratings agencies just didn't believe that Sub-Saharan Africa would be able to deal with COVID-19. And the matter of the fact is, after 1 year, that the region has actually dealt with COVID-19 much better than, for example, Europe, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and also Northern America.
So how should investors factor in subjective factors like sovereign government support and central bank intervention?
So when we look at the way we enter countries, for example, or expose ourselves to countries, invest, etc., then these qualitative factors you mentioned are very important. I have something that I call the reality index, and there I look at things like female to male labor force participation rates, the access to water, for example, education, primary, secondary, to a certain extent, tertiary education, all of these different factors, a number of other qualitative factors. And there it does very clearly show me that a number of countries, for example, like Ghana, which has gone through a process of renewal in the last 5 or 6 years together with the IMF program, where civil society is taking a part in decision-making processes and also influencing them, that those factors need to be really taken into account. And I think there's a discrepancy between those qualitative factors, and one major qualitative factor, as I mentioned before, is the way the health sector and the countries have dealt with COVID-19. I don't think that is really priced in.
Should corporate ratings be allowed to breach sovereign rating ceilings? Under what circumstances? And does it create complications for markets and investors?
I think if you look at ratings in emerging markets in the last 20 years, there have been a number of cases where the country ceiling has been broken for some corporates, etc., large corporates. And let's face it, this is a reality, or it's a reality check in this globalized world where corporates in a particular country, in an emerging market country, could have completely different realities to what the country itself is exposed to, whether it exports internationally or whether it's invested internationally. So from that point of view, I think that there is room for different ratings, if you like, between sovereigns and corporates that are based in those countries. Definitely, yes.
And finally, Simon, what is your take on the latest US-China tensions and how they will play out?
This, to me, is one of the most important factors for the next 4 years of the US presidency, especially because of the noise that we've seen in the last 4 years. And let's face it, China was about 5% of global GDP back in 2005. It is now about 18%. And if we look at the IMF WEO forecasts, then we can see that China will approach the size of the US economy within the next 5, 6, 7 years. So this is obviously something that's reflected in realpolitik. But what I think is important is that both US and China and Russia and Europe really try to reset relations. There really is no point in having these sort of negativities around. We have young populations that want to live their lives in the future and get on with things. They're not particularly interested in geopolitics and politics. And I think this is something that's very important that governments everywhere, as we have seen in the last 12, 18 months, need to take into account. And that's the younger parts of our populations that want to have a future.
Thank you, Simon. That's all the questions for today, and we hope to have you back.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, everyone, for watching. For more such stories, do visit asiatimesfinancial.com. I'm Christine Zhou reporting for ATF TV.